Hey folks, this is Mary. Welcome back to my channel. It is late at night and I'm trying a new filming setup. So I have every light in the house on and I see a bit of a glare coming from the lamp over here. We'll see how this works out. I will post this video and I welcome your comments and suggestions about lighting, but I thought I'd give this a try. This is, you can see this black background. This is a very old and beat up desk I got at Walmart many years ago. And it's seen a lot of usage. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about pens. So, this is my currently inked for August 2020. And I have my lovely pen tray that I got at the cigar store. I was wondering if the pens would show up in this tray very well. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see how they show up on camera. And I might need to spray paint this thing or something, but we'll see. So let me tell you about the pens a little bit. This is my new Monteverde Ritma. And I just recently got this. I did a little unboxing video of it, and it is red, and it kind of matches the tray. And this one has a stub nib. I'm just starting to explore different nibs, so I got the stub to try on that one. And this is my Curados with a fine nib. And I've been meaning to do a little update on the Curados, but perhaps we'll just do that today in the currently inked video. But it is working, so we're making progress. I have high hopes for this pen. This is my Twsb Eco in translucent blue. Is it translucent blue or transparent blue? I can never remember. But it's the clear blue one, and it has a medium nib, and I love this pen so much. I will probably have this pen inked up every month. Now this is the little Charlie pen. Maybe you could see right there, it says Charlie. This is the little free pen that comes with those giant bottles of Noodlers ink. And this little pen has been calling my name for a while. He's just been sitting in the pen case all by himself, and I felt so bad for him, so I didn't really need to ink him up, but I just felt like he needed some attention. So here he is, inked up for the first time in many, many months. This is one of my newer pens. This is a Diplomat Aero, and I believe the color is violet, and it has a fine nib, and this is the first time that I've inked it up, and I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about the fine nibs. Many of the pens I used last month had fine nibs or even extra fine nibs, and I didn't enjoy them very much. So we'll see how this fine nib goes this month. This is my Pelican. Ooh, I always forget. Is this the 200, the M200, or the M205? Anyway, it was the pen of the year a few years ago. It's in olivine, and I got a special package deal with this and a bottle of the olivine ink. And again, I have not used this since I bought it, so I thought it was about time I got this puppy out and used it. And this is the Esther Brook. This is a vintage pen. And there's his name, Esther Brook. I'm not sure if you can see that or not. But this is a vintage pen that I purchased from Tim's Vintage Pens. And I've heard great things about Esther Brooks. I also won an Esther Brook pen. That was the first video that I ever made. So I've been anxious to get this pen out and start writing with it, so we are going to give him a test drive this month. Alright, so now we are moving over to my notebook. And hopefully you guys can see this okay, and hopefully it's not too glary with all the lamps pointed at it. So we are going to start with the Monteverde Ritma, and it's known for its popping cap. I don't want anyone to feel disappointed for missing out on the popping cap. So, oh, and this does have a stub nib. Can we see the stub nib? Ooh, there's so many lights. But it's a, I think this is a black nib. It's very dark. And I think it's a 1.1 stub. And I have this filled. Ooh, uh-oh. He might not want to write. Okay, I think I've got it going now. Ooh, and can you guys see this? I hope you can see this. Okay, so I have this inked up with Diamine Oxblood, and this was one of the first fountain pen inks that I purchased on the recommendation of Brian Goulet. I was watching a Goulet video, and I think he was talking about good general inks to have or something like that, and he recommended this one, so I said, okay, if Brian Goulet says I should buy it, I'll buy it, and I did, and I've never used it. So I thought I needed a red ink to go with my red pen, and here we are. So this is the Monteverde Ritma with a stub nib, and in it I have Diamine Oxblood. And it's very interesting. All right, next we have my Curidas. So I guess I'll give you the short version of the story. I had originally inked this up with Britannia and Turquoise from Troublemaker, and I could not get the pen to work. The pen fell apart on me. The nib unit got stuck inside of it. All documented on that horrible Curidas catastrophe video. And I took it all apart and cleaned it, and I filled it up with Waterman Harmonious Green. Is that right? Harmonious Green? And it still wouldn't write. And I got in touch with Pen Chalet, who I got the pen from, and they were very nice and said, you know, send it back, we'll replace it. But I didn't want to give up on my little pen. So I kept trying it, you know, trying to get it to write, and eventually it did start writing. So I wrote a few pages with it in my journal just to make sure that the ink was going to keep flowing in it, and it did. So I feel like whatever catastrophe befell me before is over. So I've decided to give this one a try for this month. And I took out the Harmonious Green, and this is Noodler's Heart of Darkness. And I'm moving into a new bullet journal, and I would like to make a video about my bullet journal very soon. I'm still working on that. And I thought this would be a nice fine nib and a good ink to use in my bullet journal, because again, the bullet journal does not have the greatest paper. So I'm looking for something, you know, a finer nib. And I don't know if Heart of Darkness is known for being good on cheaper paper, but we'll see how it does. Generally, I use my Sharpie pens in my bullet journal because they don't bleed through, but we'll give this a try. So this is Noodler's Heart of Darkness. And I also saw on Wasky Squirrel's channel that he said he had completed a bottle of black ink, and he had started another bottle of black ink. And excuse me, and I had commented that I had this, you know, giant bottle of, excuse me, the clock was chiming, and I'm sure nobody wanted to sit through all of the chimes. But as I was saying, Wasky Squirrel encouraged me to try to finish the giant 4.5-ounce bottle of Heart of Darkness ink. So I am taking up the challenge. I am going to try to use up that bottle of ink. Again, that 4.5-ounce bottle is one of the first bottles of ink I ever purchased. And actually, I think I was watching another Goulet video, and Brian said that you know, nobody could ever finish one of those bottles. Oh, maybe those weren't his exact words. I think he said something like, you know, you couldn't finish it in a year or something like that. And I was like, ooh, I'm going to get that bottle and I'm going to finish it in a year. And here we are several years later, and I have barely put a dent in that bottle. So now with the encouragement of Wasky Squirrel, I shall try to finish the bottle. Oh, and I forgot to say, I was going to show the bottles of ink as I was talking about them. So this is the Diamine Oxblood that is in the Monteverde Ritma. And the Curadas has the Heart of Darkness in it. And I didn't bring the giant bottle out of the Heart of Darkness. I just put some in a little sample vial because it's easier to ink up from a little vial anyway. And here is my beloved translucent Eco in blue with the medium nib. And in this one, I finally treated myself to a bottle of Robert Oster ink. I've been dithering and dithering about which bottle to get, and I finally got one. I had a credit for a bottle at Pen Chalet, so I finally decided on Blue Water Ice. I was looking back through my older journals, and this blue was just jumping out at me, and I looked to see what ink it was, and it was this Blue Water Ice. So I decided, out of all of the Robert Oster samples I have tried, that this is the first one I would like to purchase. It's actually my second Robert Oster ink. The first one I purchased at my first pen show up in Baltimore, and that is the Frankly Blue, which I'm not sure I'm a fan of. Jury's still out on that one. I haven't given up on it. But this Blue Water Ice is so gorgeous. I just love it. So this is the Twsb Eco Blue with a medium nib. And this is my brand new bottle of Robert Oster Blue Water Ice. So pretty. So pretty. Oh my goodness, look at that. I just love it. And I do enjoy journaling with blue inks. I enjoy journaling with this pen. So probably every month I will have at least one blue ink in this pen for the purposes of journaling. Now, of course, I'll have other inks to test out and play with, and I might journal with all of them, but I definitely need to have at least one blue. And speaking of blue, here is the adorable little Charlie Pen, and he kind of has a blue swirl to his cap. I don't know if you can see that very well, but I thought he would match up nicely with my sample of Sailor Manyo Kiku. And this was an ink that I had, this was an ink that I had used back in my June edition of 30 Inks 30 Days. So I thought it would be fun to ink up this little pen and see how he does, see how he burps or doesn't burp, as the case may be. But I just wanted to try him out. And he doesn't seem to want to be working, so let me see if I can get him going. Okay, he took a little bit of coaxing, but we are flowing nicely now. I have really enjoyed the Sailor Manyo inks. They are beautiful. They have interesting properties. Very nice. So this is the Noodlers Charlie Pen. And I don't know what the nib size is. I don't think it says on there. Maybe a finish? I'll just put nib ? And this is Sailor Manyo Kiku. A lovely, lovely ink. And I wasn't sure about the properties of the Manyo ink, how they would do in an eyedropper pen, but we are going to find out. All right, next up is my Diplomat Arrow, and I believe the color is violet. And I've heard such great things about these pens, about how Diplomat nibs are amazing. This is a stainless steel nib, and every review I've seen or read about these has said that the stainless steel nibs are just as good as the gold nibs, and they're almost as expensive as the gold nibs. So I found a really good deal on this pen, but this is the most expensive pen in my collection. And I've been a little nervous about using it, so I decided that it was time that I ink it up and start using it. And the ink that I have in it is this Diatrimentis Magenta Violet that was a gift from Sarah over at Fountain Pen Insanity. So this is the first time using this pen and the first time using this ink. So I'm very excited about that. And also this is I don't know if I mentioned this, but this is a fine nib in this arrow. And at the time I ordered the pen, I was trying to use a Hobonichi planner. And if you're not familiar, it has Tomoe River paper in it, but it has a tiny, tiny grid. I think it's like 3.7 millimeters, which is teeny tiny. And I was trying to find pens that were fine enough to write in that teeny tiny grid. So now I have quite a few pens that have really fine nibs, and I have given up on the Hobonichi because it didn't work for me. But I still have all of these really fine nib pens. So if I don't like this fine nib, I don't know if Diplomat would sell me a broader nib. I don't know. I'm thinking they wouldn't, but it never hurts to ask. So this is a fine, and this ink is Diatrimentis Magenta Violet. And this is a beautiful, beautiful ink. So I'm looking forward to trying it. Ooh, look at that. It's gorgeous. All right. Next up is my only Pelican pen. And gosh, I should have looked this up. I think it's the M205 in olivine. And it was, as I mentioned, it was the pen of the year a few years ago, and I got a really good deal on it. And the ink that I have in it is also from Sarah over at Fountain Pen Insanity. This is a sample she sent me of Mont Blanc Irish Green. I am so excited about this ink. It's the first Mont Blanc ink I've ever had. So I'm very happy to have it in this pen. And also, I was watching a video from Fountain Pen Journey, a gentleman over in the UK, and he was talking about his Pelican with a steel nib. And I commented that I had this pen, but I hadn't really used it, and he encouraged me to use it because he said that, you know, their steel nibs are so good. So this is probably my second most expensive pen in my collection after the Diplomat Arrow. And I think I was a little bit miffed that I paid a lot of money for a pen that didn't have a gold nib. So I haven't really given this pen a fair chance. So I'm giving it a fair chance now, and I'm putting the lovely Irish green in it. So hopefully this will be a good combination. So this is the Pelican, and I forgot to look this up, so we're just going to go with it. The M205 in olivine. And I can always correct that later if I'm wrong. And I think it is a fine. Can we see that on the nib? I think it's a fine. Again, I can check on that later. And this is Mont Blanc Irish Green. So excited about this ink. Have you ever used any Mont Blanc inks before? And if so, which ones have you used? And what did you think of them? I'm looking forward to trying this one. Okay, and finally we have my Esther book, which I purchased from Tim's Vintage Pens. It's very light and very pretty. I love this green. And again, being a green pen, I should probably have a green ink in it, but I'm very hesitant about using different inks in my pens. And I think he might be leaking a little bit here. Let's see. Something's going on there, but it might be water coming out of the cap. So we'll look into that in a moment. But I'm very cautious about my vintage pens, and so far I have only been putting Waterman Serenity Blue in them. But I do have a beautiful Waterman Flex Nib pen that I think would, what am I trying to say? I would really like to try some black ink in it, because I think writing with that pen, which has a gold overlay with black ink, I think that would just be a beautiful combination. So this is an Esther Brook vintage pen, and I need to look up the model number because I don't remember. And these nibs actually have numbers on them. So this is a 2556. Is that a 6? I think that's a 6. So a 2556. And this is Waterman. The nib is really fine, but it's so wet. I really think I'm going to enjoy writing with this. Serenity Blue. And this does have interchangeable nibs. The little nib units unscrew, and you can switch them out. And when I purchased this from Tim, he did send me an extra nib, a different nib to try. So I'm going to start with this one and see how this one does. But so far, I am really liking it. And Waterman Serenity Blue is such a gorgeous ink. I just love it. Okay, so now I am going to steal shamelessly from Chris Saenz. She does her currently inked every month, and then she goes back to her previous currently inked and kind of rates her pens. And I find that so helpful, because you always see people ink up pens and write with them, but then they never come back later and kind of give you the results of the writing, which I think is so important. Any pen can look beautiful the first time you write with it, but how does it perform over time? How does it perform later on? So I wanted to do the same thing, just flip back and talk about last month's pens, and hopefully you will find that helpful also. And please forgive me, Chris, for copying you shamelessly, but don't they say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery? So, I know on her channel, Chris rates the pens. She gives them a grade, you know, A, B, C, D. And I don't feel very confident in my ability to quantify how I feel about the pens. So I haven't given them a grade or a number or anything like that. I just wrote down some comments. And I thought about, you know, rating them 1 to 10 or something, but, you know, they might all end up being an 8 or something like that. I don't know. So this is just my first attempt. So moving forward, hopefully I will feel more confident and come up with a system that I feel will be helpful. But anyway, I started with the Twsb Diamond 580 ALR in purple, and that had an extra fine nib, and I had Lamy Azurite in it. Lamy Azurite is a beautiful ink, and I think this was the first time I had used it, and I really enjoyed it, but the nib on that pen is an extra fine, and it's just so fine that I didn't really feel like I could enjoy the ink. I think it was a very wet ink though, so it was trying to bleed through on some of the cheaper papers that I used. Of course, in this notebook, this is very fountain pen friendly paper. This is the Exceed notebook from Walmart, and there's no trouble with bleed through on this. But just using it day to day at work, it didn't work very well. I do think I would enjoy the pen and the ink with a broader nib, so I definitely want to get broader nibs for the Twsb Diamond 580s. And then next I had the Twsb Eco in translucent green with a fine nib, and I had Diamine Sherwood green in that. And also, that was a beautiful color, and it was very pleasant to write with, but again, I felt like the nib was just too fine. I think fine and extra fine are too fine for me. I'm much more comfortable with the mediums, and I'm working on broader nibs. I'm just trying those out, but I definitely don't enjoy the finer nibs. Now, the next pen was the Pen BBS 355 in Misty Mountain, and that one does have a fine nib on it, but it writes broader than a typical fine, in my opinion. And I had the Pure Pen Saltire in that. That Saltire ink is so beautiful, and this nib was so smooth to write with. I loved everything about the pen, except every time I got the pen out to write with it, it had a hard start. And even if I stopped writing for 5 minutes and put the cap back on, every time I took the pen out to write with it, I had a hard start. Now, of course, I could get it flowing again immediately, but it was just unusual that every time I used the pen, it didn't want to write the first time. But, you know, once it got going, it was wonderful. And, of course, it could be the ink. I would need to try a different ink in it, but I felt like the ink was, you know, I felt like it flowed well, but still, it could be the pen and ink combination. I should definitely try a different ink in it. But other than that, loved the pen, loved the ink. It wrote so smooth. I let some of my coworkers try it. They were amazed at how smooth it is. And they're not into fountain pens. And a lot of times people who don't use fountain pens don't enjoy them. But that pen is just so smooth and so wonderful. I love it. So I can't wait to try some more inks in it. Next up, I had the Twsb Eco in the translucent blue, the one that I was just talking about. And in that one, I had the Troublemaker Sea Glass. And that's one of those multi-shading inks. It kind of shades green and brown. And it's a really pretty, interesting ink. But this paper is it's kind of an off-white. It's kind of a yellowish color. And I use this to test my ink, but I also use one of these notebooks as my journal to write in. And this greenish brown ink on this yellowish paper, it just looks like mud. It's so unattractive. So I'm sure this ink would be beautiful on white paper. And it was pretty and it was nice to write with, but just the color, it just looked really muddy and unappealing. So nothing to do with the pen or the ink, it was just the ink combination with the paper. Then I had the Twsb Diamond 580 ALR in Prussian blue. That one also had a fine nib. And in that one I had the Pure Pen's Celtic Sea. And again, it's a beautiful pen, it's a beautiful ink. It was pleasant to write with, but I feel like it would have been better in a fine nib. And that one I purchased from my local pen shop, the Norfolk Stationery. And when I went to purchase the pen, they had a fine and a broad. And I was very nervous about purchasing a broad nib at that point, but now I really wish I had gotten the broad, because that fine is just too fine for me. Next up, I had my vintage pen, the Eagle, with a fine nib, and I had Waterman Serenity Blue in that one. Unfortunately, that pen was just a failure. I inked it up several times, and every time I inked it, after just a day or two, it was like all of the ink just disappeared. It was obviously leaking out somewhere, but I don't know where the ink was going. And my pen roll is dark blue fabric, so I'm wondering if the ink just soaked into the pen roll and I couldn't see it because the fabric is so dark. But I did use it at work one day, and there was a puddle of blue ink on my desk, and I set my arm down in it. So that was a big mess. So I think that pen is going to need a little bit of repair. So it makes me a little bit sad that I can't use the pen right now, but I will get it fixed and I will get it running again because I love that pen so much. It is my favorite vintage pen. And then finally, I had the Twsb Go with the 1.1 stub, and I had Venta mascara in that. And this, I think this was the first time I had used a stub nib, and it was an interesting experience. I don't know if it's my favorite nib to use, but again, I'm still getting used to the shape of the stub nib. But the ink is gorgeous. It just shades blue and purple, and I feel like the stub really showed off the color. I really enjoyed it. So I'm trying not to purchase a lot of things now, but I think I'm going to be putting this Venta mascara on my future purchase list because I really enjoyed that one. All right, so that was a recap of last month's pens and inks. And here are this month's pens and inks again. So hopefully I will have success with all of these this time. And if you have any questions about anything, please let me know in the comments below. And please let me know what you will be writing with this month. I would be very interested to know. So if you enjoy these videos, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.